Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Parkinson's Foundation's PD Health at Home Wellness Wednesday. We're so glad to have you here. Today, we return to our Care Partner Conversation series, where we welcome our Care Partner panelists into a dynamic and engaging conversation. Our panelists will offer their lived experiences, offer valuable strategies, and provide a space for support and connection. Before we get started, I wanted to thank today's webinar sponsor, Amneal, for supporting the mission of the Parkinson's Foundation. Today's Wellness Wednesday program is part of our PD Health at Home virtual program series. Each week, we offer sessions tailored to support people with Parkinson's and their care partners, including Mindfulness Mondays, Wellness Wednesdays, Fitness Fridays, and expert briefings. We also have our Spanish language series, EP Salud en Casa. Be sure to visit our website at parkinson.org/pdhealth to see what's coming up and explore our videos on YouTube. PD Health at Home is presented by the Light of Day Foundation, whose generosity has made today's programming possible. So now let's turn the focus of today's Care Partner conversation. This series was created in response to you, your voices, your feedback, and your desire for more dialogue rather than lectures. Over the years of producing and hosting webinars, the Parkinson's Foundation has heard you loud and clear. Care partners need a space for open, meaningful conversations about the realities of supporting someone living with Parkinson's. Our Care Partner Conversations program is designed to be just that, a space for organic, authentic discussion about the topics we may not always have the opportunity to explore. Today, we'll cover the topic of communicating and building trust in everyday moments. We'll explore ways to communicate while strengthening trust and connection in everyday situations. We'll also talk about navigating difficult conversations and responding with empathy, helping to build stronger connections today while planning confidently for the future. Our panelists are care partners walking this path in different ways and stages. There is no single right way to do this. Our goal is to share what we've learned from our own experiences and to normalize the emotional and physical impact that often goes unseen. We invite our audience to submit questions in the Q&A button. I'll jump in towards the end to weave them into our discussion. And with that, it is my absolute privilege to welcome our panelists, Terry, Barbara, and Etana, members of our community who are living the care partner experience every day. I also want to welcome Amanda, a colleague here at the Foundation, and most importantly, a Parkinson's disease information specialist or helpline specialist to help facilitate today's conversation. So I'll give them just a few moments to jump on camera, and I do see them here. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Let's just start with just briefly introducing yourselves.
I'll jump in. I'm Barbara, and I'm a care partner to my husband, Gary, who was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 2017. He's a Vietnam veteran who was exposed to Agent Orange. And then a year ago, he had a major complication with a hemorrhage on his spinal cord. So we're now dealing also with spinal cord injury issues with the Parkinson's.
Hi, everyone. My name is Etana Solomon. My mom was diagnosed in 2014 when just after I turned 18. I'm a member of the People with Parkinson's Advisory Council at the Parkinson's Foundation, and I also run a community multimedia project called A Good Run that has a documentary and a 5K run annually in support of the foundation.
Hi, everybody. I'm Terry Thompson. I am a care partner to my partner, Jeff. He was diagnosed in 2017. And, I'm just happy to be a part of this group because I've grown a lot just in these conversations, and it means as much to us on this panel as it does to you all.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all. My name is Amanda Janicke, and I work on the helpline here at the foundation. I've been here since 2019, and it's really, really an honor to be asked to help with this conversation today. So I want to start, kind of kick things off talking about trust as it relates to communication. We know trust is often built in the small moments of daily life, the conversations we have, the ways we support one another, the routines we share. And as Parkinson's progresses and changes over time, communication may look different, but those everyday interactions can continue to strengthen connection and understanding. So I want to ask the panelists to kind of reflect on the moments and habits that help build trust in your relationship. So can you describe your communication style and how has Parkinson's changed the way you communicate with your loved one?
Yeah, I think, my mom was diagnosed when I was 18, so it's fairly young for her to be diagnosed at the age of 58, as well as for me. So I think, our relationship changed from mother and daughter to caregiver and caree, and I think that dynamic definitely changed the way that we communicate. And there was definitely tension, in the onset, but I think just being honest with each other and recognizing that you're on the same team is really important, regardless of the relationship that you have with your person with Parkinson's.
I love what you said about being on the same team. That's really important to remember. And that's something that we remind ourselves of when things get difficult, that we're looking at the challenge together. We're not the challenge ourselves. We're a team working on this to make things better. And I would say in terms of communication, Gary was always very articulate. Was very easy for him to communicate. He did a lot of work in communication before he retired. But it's really challenging now because he needs more time to think. I need to be patient with him. He can only think about one thing at a time. So he doesn't multitask things in terms of his cognition. And I need to wait for a response. And that's really been a challenge because he also has a hearing loss and he wears hearing aids. So sometimes when I'm speaking with him and he doesn't answer right away, I'm not sure if it's because he's not hearing me or if he needs more time to think. And so that's one of the things the challenges we deal with. And sometimes I'm very good at that and being patient, and other times I jump in too fast and say, "Did you hear me?" Or "What do you think?" And he'll say, "I need more time. I need more time." And a reminder.
That that certainly resonates in our household. But it's a little opposite. I'm hearing impaired, and that Jeff has started to, have the kind of mushy conversational style that's difficult to hear. So he'll start a sentence strong, and then it'll fade towards the end. And so I'm constantly leaning in and kind of asking, "What was that you said?" And the multiple steps. My mind goes a mile a minute, and so especially when I'm in caregiver mode and I'm trying to rescue, which is something I'm working on. But I'll rattle off all these things and forget that it's really a one-step process now. Yeah, it's certainly it's something you feel your way into because the communication style that you grew into when you came together as a family, it's different. It's different now.
Mhm.
Yeah, it sounds like practice. Like this takes practice and it's an ongoing, effort.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm curious, I love the idea of like being on the same team and kind of having that be your anchor. Like, let's get back to being on the same team. Um, what what has helped you? Like, what have you found has helped you reduce misunderstandings or frustrations when it comes to communication?
I think for us, talking about our communication style. So, for instance, one conversation we had a couple of years ago was, when you're struggling with a word, that slowness of thought and that cognition, when you're struggling with that, what's more helpful for you? Do you want me to jump in and offer
Mhm.
better for you if I just hang back and give you time to find the word? And that's helped us immensely. But I do like the teamwork. We'll high five each other and yell teamwork when we do something. But yeah, that asking that communication style, like what's going to work for you, especially in social settings as well. You know, Do you want me to pause the conversation in the group so you can jump in or, hold that space for you? What's going to be helpful for you? Because what I find with Jeff is it's not that he doesn't want to communicate, but often his thought process and communication processes is slower. And so he often just doesn't because it's almost not worth the trouble. And I want to make it worth the trouble.
Mhm. We had an example happen this morning where we had someone coming to help us with some outside work, and she's really wonderful. Um, but she is quick to jump in. And at one point, she was asking Gary about what he wanted done, and he needed time to think. She kept jumping in, and I said, he just needs a moment now. And then she was very respectful of that and was silent, and then he was able to think of what he wanted to say. And something else about this too, in terms of the communication, lately, Gary has started interrupting me. And that's been something that actually used to be an opposite problem where he would feel like people were interrupting him and he needed more time. But we just talked about this last evening where he said, you mentioned that I'm interrupting you. He said, I want you to know why I'm doing that. I'm doing that because if I don't say it right now, I may not remember it. That was so helpful for me to know.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think setting the scene on the tough conversations is important. My family dynamic is so that I'm the majority caregiver for my mom exclusively. And so I think sometimes it's just about setting the scene before you say the thing that you need to say. Like, hey, I just want to let you know I need to bring this up. I feel XYZ about bringing this up. It's very hard for me to do so, or I've been, avoiding bringing it up because of I feel like XYZ, these things just allows them to kind of really settle into the conversation, focus, and allows them to understand where you're coming from. Because a lot of these
Mhm.
topics, especially with progression, my mom's in the advanced stages, there's a lot of hurdles to jump through, and some of those conversations can be really, really challenging around finances, around progression of care. And you might need to just preemptively share how you're feeling or how they may react so that you can get to a point where the conversation is going to start at a good place.
Mhm.
So you're,
And oh,
go ahead,
sorry.
Barbara.
Well, we have found that couples counseling has been really useful for us as well. And being able to put things into words rather than just thinking about them together. And if we get into a roadblock, and humor is so helpful in talking about things because life can be so ridiculous with this disease. And just being able to laugh about it and be silly about it can really help to break the tension and be able to talk about difficult things in an easier way for us.
I think that building on both of your comments, there's also this reactive conversation. Like Itana, you were kind of talking about a proactive kind of, coming to a conversation. And I don't mean reactive in a negative way, but sometimes we'll review a conversation later. You know, that conversation we were having earlier,
Mhm.
what I didn't say was, or confused is, can we touch base on that? Can we follow up? Just
Mhm.
back to that. And that's also helpful because the next time we get towards a situation that needs that level of conversation, we're a little more prepared.
Mhm.
It sounds like you found a way to sort of resolve or sort of address anything that may have not quite gone right that time, during that conversation, because it can't all be, perfect. So you found a way to resolve and help you can move forward. Barbara and Itana, have you found ways to kind of, take another look at conversations that didn't go quite right, or how do you resolve when it doesn't go well?
Well, something that I work on is letting things go at the time when they feel tense. And that's been a challenge for me because I like to get in and work on the problem. And um, sometimes it's just not appropriate or helpful. So just stepping back, taking a pause, And either just saying it to myself, we can get back to this later, or if it feels like it's okay to say it, that it's not going to make the situation worse, saying, well, let's let this go for now and we can talk more about it later. And then when things are less tense, like what Terry was talking about, getting back to it later and say, you remember earlier when we had this difficult conversation or when this came up, can we get back to it? And if this isn't a good time, can we set up a time to do it? And that's been helpful for us, but not easy always.
Yeah, and I think, it's never too late for an apology.
Mhm.
I navigated caregiving throughout my 20s, and so,
Mm.
I made a lot of mistakes and was very emotional at times and may have like done things wrong in the wrong way or suggested things that were insensitive without really understanding what Parkinson's was or what it looked like. And so I think just recognizing like, hey, I'm really sorry, or, there'll be things that I didn't think were a big deal that were a big deal or did hurt her. And vice versa. Sometimes I think, just sharing like, hey, I really wish that that went in a different way, or I really wish that we did this sooner when I brought it up a couple months ago. I'm not being accusatory, but I am just sharing like sometimes you have your autonomy over your health and your body, but I also want to be a part of the decision making because we're on the same team, right? And it's just
Mhm.
always going back to that or finding whatever North Star works for you and your person with Parkinson's is really helpful. But yeah, it's never too late to apologize or suggest or share that something bothered you if it took place.
Yeah, I think that's important. Like the communication, there's reciprocity there. Oftentimes I think when we're in care partner mode, our communication is focused on what they need and what they're feeling and how we can help them. And I think that they're just as interested in what we need and what we want and how they can help us. And sometimes, it's like it. Sometimes I have to say, I'm really not prepared for this conversation right now. Can we table this and come back to it later? But I'm also having to learn that not everything is urgent, like Barbara was saying. Is the house on fire or do we just need coffee? Can this be settled later or can it just be let go? Because I do have an urgency to heal everything all at once.
I think you bring up a good point. You kind of bring up that there's emotions underneath these conversations, and um, we are put in the position to sort of, like Itana, you were saying, you kind of prepare your mom a little bit, like so that she knows your intentions when you go into a conversation, like, that you're coming from a, shared goal, or, a good place. So I want to talk a little bit about, how to navigate the emotional piece of the uncertainty of Parkinson's, when it comes to the conversations that are not easy. Of course, it helps to talk openly about fears, hopes, expectations for the future. It can help us create that shared sense of understanding and preparedness. But again, not easy conversations, thinking about, the future and uncertainty. I want to ask you, the panelists, about, what conversations have been the hardest to start with your loved one or continue since Parkinson's has become part of your lives?
Mhm. Well, I think one conversation is safety and independence. Um, it's so important for all of us to have a sense of independence. And at the same time, it's so important to feel like your partner is safe. And one of the things that Gary and I have worked on is to really try to step into the other person's shoes so that if I am feeling like something he wants to do is not safe for him, to imagine, okay, what it would be like for me if he was saying to me, well, I don't want you to do that. And am I being overprotective or am I being realistic? Um, and so that's something I think we both really try to do. I think it's also been helpful for us to bring in professionals to help us with this, like safety issues with an occupational therapist and talking about what kinds of things could be useful, that um, she might see things in a different way than we do. And I know that I had asked for support with that with Gary, where he was feeling like, oh, I don't really think I need this. And I was saying, well, yeah, you might not need it this month, but could we think about maybe next month so that we're not scurrying around and trying to get something to keep you safe? And she was really helpful with that for planning ahead, because we did a good job of planning ahead with, just getting older with grab bars and doing things in the house to be safer. But then it reached another level. And I think another thing that's been helpful for us with all of this in terms of another person is palliative care, which is just another layer of support in talking about things and working through things that are difficult in terms of planning.
Yeah, I think, my mom and I made the decision together to move her to assisted living. I had lived with her throughout the pandemic for about 2 years. And I think at that point, the progression had advanced. And I was like, let's talk about this. Here are our options, right? I leave the workforce at 26, which is pretty extreme. We figure out some type of hybrid model to extend the time for the next year or so, recognizing that more care will be needed, or we kind of go together, find you a place that works, and I visit as much as I can, and I think just giving like having breaking down all of the decisions, we both kind of made the decision together that no matter what happens, me continuing to have a career is important, being this young. And so, whatever we need to do to have that, as well as making sure that, I'm close and able to visit as many times as I can, is really critical. And I think, something that's interesting for my specific situation is my mom's Parkinson's is very advanced. So her speech is limited in her ability to form words, but cognitively, because she's so young, she's pretty sharp. Like she can still understand, a lot of the things that are going on in life and in her life and care. So I think just recognizing, communication might change, but right now, in-person communication is really important for us. I don't know where you're located or how far you are, or whether you're living with your person with Parkinson's or not, but just recognizing the environment for the hard conversations might be equally as important, right? Trying to make those hard conversations in person versus virtual, or trying to give time and space for them rather than in between appointments. I think that can also really make a huge difference in how those conversations go. But I think all of the conversations around progression for us are really hard on me too, like emotionally. And so I think just being, it's important to be strong for your person with Parkinson's, but I think sometimes it can be equally as helpful for your person with Parkinson's to support you.
Mhm.
And the way that my mom's able to do that is through emotional, and sometimes, we'll get emotional together, but I think it's helpful to kind of make it so I'm not like some strong robot and, she's the only one breaking down and affected by this.
Mhm.
That resonates so much. I think we've settled into a cadence on logistical issues that can be fixed. Like how are we packing your meds for vacation, things like that. Where it's harder for us to have conversations is around those emotional issues, especially the situations that don't have a solution, really. The other day, Jeff admitted that he was scared, and I said, me too. And we had a good conversation about that. And later he says, it really helped me to know that you're scared too. He's carrying
Mhm.
it all on his own. And it's helpful to have that vulnerability, that moment of trust and those emotional conversations, even though they are hard, I think they're more healing than the logistical ones.
Mhm.
Yeah, Itana, you mentioned like being in person, communicating in person with your mom is best, at this point. Um, Barbara and Terry, have you found other kind of indicators that, okay, this might be a good time to bring up this hard conversation? Like, what are the signs to you that, it's a good time?
We have couple time. We sit on the back porch and drink coffee in
Mhm.
the mornings, and
Mhm.
those are the best moments. We had some friends coming over just for lunch or something, and I don't know what happened, but it fell through, and we were really grateful because we had nothing else planned, and we just sat and talked. And so we tend to find ourselves in these quiet moments. I think, especially for the harder conversations, devices off, televisions off, quiet space with lots of time to let things
Mhm.
through. It's really more difficult, I think, to try to have those difficult conversations when you don't have the time set aside because
Mhm.
the next thing that has to be done, the next errand that has to be run, things like that. So if you can be proactive and schedule some time for it, we find it really helpful.
Mhm.
It can be frustrating, I think, for a person with Parkinson's to try to rush a conversation, especially an emotional.
Yeah. 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 There is no rushing. And one of the things that we used to do more often, and this just reminds me that it would be a good idea to get back into it, is we would, like, once a week, be sure to say, how are we doing? And just kind of check in with each other and how was the week. We've had a number of things that we've been a part of recently where it's just been natural for us to be doing a lot of talking and talking about how things are going. And so we've had a lot of that. And I would say the more we can do that, the better we are, the better we feel individually, and the better we feel as a team. And now that we're in a really nice time of year to be outside, we're in Colorado. We sit outside in the garden, and it's just we listen to the birds, and we just sit there and have an opportunity to talk, and it just gives us that space. And what Terry was bringing up about rushing, there there's nothing productive about trying to rush with anything with Parkinson's, whether it's a conversation or getting ready for something or going somewhere. It just is catastrophic. It just does not work.
I think there's also a difference between a relational communications issue and a Parkinson's related communication issue. So is this hard to talk about because this is where our relationship is, or are we just not talking because there's a Parkinson's issue at hand? For instance, sometimes Jeffrey will go radio silent on me, just kind of sitting there and not saying anything. You can easily read that as they don't want to talk. You don't want to have a
Mhm.
disinterested in what you have to say, but it's really more of a Parkinson's thing than, their reluctance to have a conversation. Sometimes a person with Parkinson's has the face that looks disinterested, and they're really not. And sometimes
Mhm.
they're really aching to have a conversation, but want you to bring it up.
Mhm.
No, Barbara, hearing you talk about being in the garden, I mean, it makes me think how sometimes, if it's feasible, like a little change of scenery can do wonders to sort of get us out of, maybe where we're at and help us, have a difficult conversation or just change a little bit. I've even heard like sitting side by side for some people
Mhm.
reduces a little tension, than face to face. I mean, it's just finding what works for you in your relationship. Um, but I wanted to get a little bit more feedback from you on the panel about, how do you know when it's time to step in when planning, like planning for the future versus letting your loved one choose? You, Barbara, you did kind of talk about this a little bit when it came to, working with an occupational therapist, but how do you kind of balance that, like that their autonomy versus, knowing when you need to step in? How have you navigated that? Um, I'm curious.
During the past year, Gary spent a lot of time in the hospital, and I needed to be very active in those decisions. Um, and sometimes I needed to make the decision because he was too ill to make them, or I have a background in nursing and psychology, and so I understood a lot of things that he did not understand in the way that would have been most helpful. So I was, someone who was explaining things to him and talking about where I thought it was safest to go, or what are the different options. So I felt like I was much more in charge then because I actually needed to be that way for safety's sake. Um, I think, I don't know, for me, if it's really making me anxious, like I'm really afraid that he's going to fall. And he's spent a lot of time in the wheelchair, but now he's able to do more walking. And so um, I'm just trying to think of a recent example of somewhere where we went, and this is again the independence thing. So knowing how important it is to be independent. So I remember saying something, well, he was said, I think I can do this. I think I can walk. I don't think I have to take the wheelchair. And I said, well, what if we take the wheelchair and I wheel it and you can walk beside it? And then if you need to get in the wheelchair, you can do that. And he said, oh, what a great idea. And so one of the things we love to do is on Sunday mornings, we love to go to the Botanic Gardens. And this was something we've done for years. And it's a spiritual thing where we go at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning, we stop and pick up some coffee and tea on the way, and we go. But now it's different now that he's got these mobility issues with a wheelchair. And the last time we went there, we did this very thing with the wheelchair. He said, "Do you think I can make it around there with the crutch? Do you think I can do that?" And I said, "Well, you know what? You can start that way. We can take the crutch, we can take the wheelchair. It doesn't matter if we take all this stuff, and we'll just do one step at a time and see how it feels." And it was terrific. It was just it, and we had such a good time. But we kept all the options open. We didn't have to say, "Oh, it has to be this way." And so we get around with a lot of stuff, but it works. It works.
I
Yeah.
think something I've had to figure out for me is that I'm not in charge. I'm not in control. I may be the care partner, but the word is partner, not manager.
Mhm,
In as much as possible, I want Jeff to be independent. Um,
mhm,
I am the person who makes sure he's not going to fall as we go down the stairs, things like that. And so, I'm trying to change my language. So instead of how will I know when you need help, how will we know when,
mhm,
including him in that conversation can be very isolating for both of us with that kind of language. So, or explaining why I'm doing something. I'm moving all these things because I'm afraid you're going to fall. I keep moving his.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
I'm like, well, because it's a fall hazard if you leave it there and you wake up in the middle of the night, right? So
mhm,
explaining my thinking and inviting him into the conversation, like what would be a better way to do this yoga mat thing so that you can be safe because I'm super anxious about it.
mhm. You brought something up. I just want to jump in again that you just reminded me of something. For me, I have been adjusting all the time without realizing how much I'm adjusting. And so speaking out loud about what I'm doing, I do that very same thing, Terry, where I'll say before we go to bed, hey, I'm going to move this so that if you get up during the night, or I'm going to do this just in case. And oftentimes I'll say, so we don't fall or so we don't trip. But thinking out loud about that and saying what I'm doing. Yeah. And you before you don't even realize all the things you've just done automatically and without thinking about it, unless you have kind of a conversation like this.
Yeah, and again, like my mom's physical decline is quite severe, but her cognitive decline is not. So when it regards like her health or body, I do let her make the majority of those decisions, even when I would love for us to make a different decision, specifically around choking episodes or falling, right? A lot of times in those situations, I would love for us to go to the hospital and get checked out, but the hospital is a really hard place for a person with
Mhm,
Parkinson's, especially in regards to medication and all of that. The Parkinson's Foundation has an incredible hospital safety guide. If you are interested, maybe someone can put that in the chat. But still, the hospital is a very hard place. So when those things happen, a lot of times I am like really adamant that we go, but I recognize that where my mom is in her current state, that that's not necessarily her first choice. And
Mhm.
if she's able to prove to me and the EMTs that, there's no imminent issue, I have to let that go, even though those things can progress because head trauma or aspiration pneumonia are things that can take place. I have to kind of let that go. In terms of like the finances or logistical decisions, I have taken those on, and it did just get to the point where, slowly but surely you take one thing away slowly, and it's not necessarily a trick, but it's like, hey, just gonna let you know this credit card is no longer active. If you need something, let me know. I would love to place the order for you, right? And then slowly from there, you're like, I think that maybe we do art therapy virtually every other week. Let's see how that works better for you. And so it's not like necessarily making decisions for her, but it's together, and you're and making sure that she's aware of those decisions made. But I think a lot of times, again, it's setting the scene and recognizing, hey, this is why I'm thinking about doing this. How do you feel about that? And bringing it up before the decision is implemented, I think is helpful. So if I wanted to say, hey, I don't think that you should have, these credit cards around in your bag anymore, especially living in a facility where I'm not there all the time. I brought it up probably 2 months before I actually, decided to do that. And by the time that I decided to do it, I had brought it up enough times that it's not a surprise, and there's always a trial period. Let's see what 2 weeks looks like. And in 2 weeks, if you want this back or you think you need this, we can talk about it. And normally, that 2 weeks, and this is something, again, it's not like a trick, but this is something, right, where like she probably won't remember. She probably won't feel like it has changed her life too much. And so, these are just some of the tools that I have in my tool belt when kind of progressing on the more logistical side, because sometimes it is just safer and quite frankly, more manageable for a care partner to take on.
Mhm.
Idea of a trial period. I'm gonna instigate that. Can I ask Barbara a question real quick? Barbara, last conversation you mentioned that with you and Gary, whichever of you two has the most conservative thought around a decision, you would.
Mhm.
Can you take like a quick minute? Just I wanted to hear more about that, though we moved on in the last conversation. Is that okay, Amanda?
Sure. We started that during COVID, and because we don't always agree on what we think would be the safest thing or what we want to do. And we're two different people, we have different opinions. But during that time, when it was so scary, we decided that the thing that worked the best for us was whoever had the most conservative opinion about keeping us safe, we would go with that. We would respect that because that would be the safest thing to do. And we recently actually talked about that again. And I think that we still feel that way. We still respect each other's position. I think more flexible now than I did during COVID because it was so scary because people with Parkinson's could get so sick and it would be so critically ill. Um, and now it feels like it's more specific things around what I was saying before about fear of falling or of those kinds of physical things. But we actually talked about that and how do we feel about this now? And I do feel like if I said, Gary, I know you think you can do this, but it really scares me, he would say, okay, I won't do it.
Thank you. No, that was helpful.
This
Sorry, man.
is no, it's great. I'm so glad that you asked Barbara to say more about that. I mean, we've covered so many like tools, almost like hacks, like just different things to try. I mean, the idea of like, let's give it a try,
Mhm.
and then Etana, you find, it actually worked out. So, we'll stick with it. And the idea of being flexible, or, kind of having this agreement, like you have, Barbara, that, let's kind of give each other the benefit of the doubt as far as whoever is going to have that safer, decision. Let's go with that. Um, I before we get to the live questions, I wanted to just kind of take a few minutes to reflect upon kind of what you've learned about your loved one and yourself and your relationship because you have different perspectives. Your loved one has their own perspective, and you have your own perspective and your own unique challenges. So I'm curious, if you could share, the panelists could share what have you learned about yourself in this role as a care partner?
I can go. Learning, obviously, but I've learned I've got my own stuff, and that I need to take care of my side of the street if I'm going to be in this relationship moving forward, and help him. It's I think sometimes it's easy for us as care partners to focus on them, and I think it's what I'm learning is that I could revise some of the ways I see the world, and the ways I see specifically my need to manage everything. And so I've learned a lot about Jeff. I've learned a lot about us as a couple, but I've learned a ton about me as an individual, and it's some of those lessons have been hard.
Mhm. Mhm. I've learned once again about my need for control at times and really wanting to, just jump in and solve the problem. And I've also learned, like I mentioned, Gary was in the hospital so much, and I learned so much about my own resilience and my own strength during this time, um, and how important it is for me to take care of myself. How important it is for me to have support. And I'm in a support group with other veteran spouses for people with have Parkinson's disease, and um, my own individual therapy as well, um, to be able to deal with my anxiety and my fears. And um, none of us can do this alone. And I don't know what we would have done and what we would do if we didn't have all these people around us to help to look after us. We really need to be connected, and I realize that more than ever, how important it is to be connected to other people and supports, and that I can't do this myself, even though I'm a capable person and I'd love to jump in and solve all the problems. I cannot.
Yeah, and I think it's like really about trying to create balance or trying to set hard boundaries. There'll be times where there is an incident that takes place and I'm visiting my mom every day, sometimes twice a day for a week. It could be a month, it could be more than that, but you have to set boundaries. Like no matter what happens, I'm gonna be in my friend's wedding. Like no matter, it could be anything, that's taking place during that time, but like I'm gonna make sure that I'm there. It could be, after this, when she's back stable again, I'm gonna book that trip, or I'm gonna go, visit my grandchild, or wherever you are in life. Make sure you just try to give yourself something, and try to give your person with Parkinson's something when we're on the other side of this, let's remember those, we're going to go to the botanical garden, like first thing we're going to do, it just helps you think that about your future together and gives you almost like a carrot at the end of a hard time. And a lot of times you don't know how long that time is going to be, but you have to set some parameters, because if you don't take care of yourself, you're going to be an awful caregiver. I promise you.
Mhm.
Um, and it'll affect everyone in the situation. So sometimes you just have to be like, hey, I know that things are bad right now, but XYZ is going to visit for the weekend. I'm going to go do this other thing, and you'll feel guilty, but the more that you do it, or the more that you do it, it will have positive effects, even if the first time you do it you feel awful and you're emotional the entire time. As you do it more and implement those things, it'll be easier for you to kind of compartmentalize a little bit and still enjoy that moment that you've kind of blocked off for yourself.
Mhm.
I think I've also learned that two things can exist in the same space, right? This is hard. It just,
Mhm.
but we've done hard things before. We can do this. But in the same space can also be beautiful. The level of vulnerability and trust that it requires just brings you closer inherently.
Mhm.
I used to like just shrug my shoulders at those people, say, "Oh, I got this illness and it made me a better person." But there is an element of that where
Mhm.
you can find the grace and the beauty in even these hard things, and that's something that is evolving even now for me. That this is still a beautiful relationship, and this is still the person I fell in love with
Mhm.
all those years ago, and it's worth every minute of my effort.
Mhm. There's no place I would rather be. I often say that. As hard as it can be, as challenging as it can be, there's no place I'd rather be.
100%.
Thank you. That was beautiful. And I know that we do have some live questions, so Danielle will join and help us out with those.
Thank you guys. You covered so many different themes, so many different topics, and really it's a lot of things that a lot of questions, a lot of comments that we've gotten from P Health at Home through all of the different resources that we offer here at the foundation. And just being able to cover all of that in the span of 45 minutes is amazing. So I just really wanted to echo and thank you guys for really being very vulnerable during today's conversation. A lot of different resources were covered, a lot of different topics were covered, like I had just said. Just wanted to remind everyone that this is being recorded. We will share links to all of the different resources that were discussed today. And then really now we're going to move on to some of the live questions that were submitted during the program. And so I want to start off with this one. I am very impressed with how calm and rational you all sound, and how rational and calm your conversations with your loved ones are. Do you ever lose it?
Oh my goodness. Just the other day, we were having this conversation and I was so frustrated and I put my hands like this and went, "Arr." And Gary said, "What is that?" And I said, "Oh, nothing." I just felt like screaming.
Yes, I've been known to say I am not my highest self in this moment. You need to just I'm gonna I'm gonna need a minute. There's no way I think that you can do this without just losing your ever-loving mind in moments. I think that the powerful thing is coming back to yourself. And then
Mhm.
and you don't have to do this with your person with Parkinson's, but find a moment to kind of say, what was that all about? What was the about? Why did I just throw a fork across the kitchen? What is the emotion underlying this breakdown that I'm having? You're gonna
Mhm.
human. It happens to us all the time on both sides. But it's coming back together. It's the resilience Barbara talked about. It's the conversation that Etana talked about. It's you find your way through those frustrating moments and you accept that they're human and they don't make you a worse care partner. Just
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, and I feel like I can be all over the place. Like there are times where I visited my mom and I said, "You know what? I shouldn't have come today. I just couldn't. I just didn't have it. Like I didn't have any bandwidth. I didn't have enough compassion for the day. I was short. I was a little cold and like that just messes up both of our time. Like I could have had that time back to put myself back together and come back on another terms. Also, my mom has been in a facility for the last 4 years. The things that that facility has seen, I mean, this past week they missed her medication twice and she had a fall, right? So that's enough for me to have absolutely lost my mind. I mean, on Friday, I couldn't even look at the person in charge. Like she wanted to try to have a conversation with me, and I said, I'm here to see my mom. I can't even talk to you right now. I had to wait until Monday to have a conversation about it. So again, it's just about recognizing like the full range of emotions are going to be a part of this, and the faster that you're just recognize that that's part of it and don't try to control them, honestly, the easier it'll be for you to have those calm conversations because you just let it out when it happens. And whatever that looks like for you, it could be exercise or therapy or, confiding in a loved one, or hanging out with friends and or family. But, you need to have an outlet for these feelings because if you
Mhm.
bottle them up, the only way they're going to come out is in the wrong way. And that could be directed at your person with Parkinson's, at work, in your other relationships, whatever. And is really detrimental to everyone.
it's so
That's
smart.
oh, go ahead, Terry.
That grief, that anxiety, it will wait you out. Like, and then it
Mhm.
out in these ways that you're not expecting it. So those freakouts, those losing your patience, those moments, they'll lessen the more you communicate. And that's why this topic today is so important. Not just communicate
Mhm.
Parkinson's with your therapist, with your friends, with your family, with yourself, reviewing
Mhm.
again and just saying, what was that all about? What fear am I expressing? Uh,
Yeah. I found I have a meditation practice, and I find that that has um, really helped me deal with the difficult situations. But that doesn't mean I don't feel anxious. Oftentimes at night when I go to bed, I'm feeling anxious, and I'll have to really practice deep breathing and calming myself down and just really trying to stay in the moment and not thinking about, oh, what this could happen or that could happen. So that's really important. And I was thinking back to what Etana was saying about the institution, and also uh, about the hospital safety guide. When Gary was in the hospital, we had a stack of hospital safety guides on his nightstand, and I was giving those out to people and educating people all the time. And that's one of the most frustrating things, is in terms of helping your partner or the person you're caring for to be safe, is you have those really frustrating conversations with other people who are caring for your loved one, and that can also be hard. So it's we don't always we're not always as calm as we seem right now.
When we were talking about this earlier, Barbara, I was thinking about the hospital issue. Friends, get the guide. You may not need it right now, but you'll be so happy you had it in a moment of crisis. But yeah, I will lose it when I have to explain to medical staff what Parkinson's is and certain medications and things like that. It certainly. The other thing I want to say about this, and then we can move on, is that this is where you can invite your person with Parkinson's in as well. Jeffrey said the other day, he says, we don't pray together as much as we used to. I'm like, you're right. And my mind's all over the place, and that would be something that we need to do more of. So, that you're not alone.
Mhm.
Thank you for being just so real. Someone commented saying, I 100% agree. I do want to throw the fork across the room as well. So just really echoing that sentiment that um, our panelists might look calm now, but like they shared, it's just taking each day, each second really to pause, think, and just reflect before, before saying that next word. Um, on a similar vein, but someone's asking, how do you handle the anger or frustration from your loved one with Parkinson's, especially when you're just trying to help? So this could be a
Mhm.
symptom of Parkinson's. It could just be from frustration, from not being able to do things the way that they used to. So how do you go about it, trying to address a situation like this?
We just had an incident that happened. We were on a trip, and um, I suggested that we make a last minute change in what time we were being picked up by the shuttle bus. And it was very difficult for Gary. And I mentioned earlier that last minute things and surprises don't work very well, and it didn't work very well. And when those things happen, he can get angry and he's frustrated because it's so hard for him then to concentrate, to stay on task, to get done what he needs to get done. And I know it must be terrible because he was always so organized, and now he can't do this at the drop of a hat. But it feels sometimes like I'm then feeling the frustration and the anger. And I think just talking about it, it feels like you're taking it out on me. And when that happens, and I know that he doesn't want to do that, so I think just really just talking about it, and also just stepping away and having a moment, um, for me.
For me, it's recognizing that it hurts.
Mhm.
It hurts. And then finding the space beyond that pain to recognize that it's not intentional. You know,
Mhm.
we were having a conversation a few weeks ago, and Jeffrey said, I don't want to become someone who's mean to you. And I said, I don't want that either. It's quite we do have those moments. I think, Barbara, you hit on that point. It's like when things are rushed, when plans are changed. The other day we were doing yard work and I just said, "You go plant that. I'm going to deal with this." And he got upset. And then later I realized it was because he wanted to do the task and I was just bossing the whole thing. I became Bossy the cow. Which is, where it's like I had to tell him a few days later, the other day when we were trimming the plants, I that was totally my bad. That shouldn't have happened. And my fear was I didn't want you to be exhausted by that task. And so I wanted to take it on and I should have just asked you.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think in my situation, my mom was a special education teacher for many, many years. Her patience know no bounds. So really the anger that I'm often dealing with is my own, which makes me feel even worse because it's like not only is she the sick one, but she's the patient one. So now I have to reconcile with all of the things. But, we get frustrated over the same things. I mean, especially where she's at now, and I think we've covered on in terms of how to navigate that together.
Etana, was it you that was saying that you recognize that your anger is at Parkinson's and not at the person, or was that you, Barbara? There was some conversation we were having earlier.
I know we had that conversation before, but yeah, it's Parkinson's is what we're angry about.
Right.
Yeah. And keeping that in mind.
Exactly.
A lot of self-reflection, just from the group here, and really being able to recognize when you need to take a step back. But I think there are a few folks joining us today who aren't as far along in their caregiver journey, and maybe they're not there yet where they don't feel fully comfortable in having these types of open conversations with their loved ones. So I need guidance there, on just helping encourage the care partner on how to have these types of challenging conversations.
Something that can be really useful is being in a support group where you have a place as a care partner to talk openly about what you're feeling and to know that you're not alone in how you're feeling. And that in itself can be a practice session for bringing things up with your loved one if you're not comfortable. And you'll be able to hear how other people are handling it. And I think it's so important to be connected. The Parkinson's community is a large, supportive, caring, loving community. And I would say whatever you can do to get connected and get support will be helpful.
I absolutely agree. I think, going through it at the age I'm going through, a lot of my peers cannot relate, and I found that super frustrating. But what I've recognized is like, age and where you are in your lived experience doesn't really matter when it comes to Parkinson's. A lot of the people that are going through what you're going through can relate on a fundamental human level. And it's really about focusing more on the human experience of caring for someone, even if the person that you're getting support from in your community isn't caring for someone with Parkinson's, if they're caring for someone in general, you can probably relate on a lot of levels. So definitely just exercise that muscle of sharing, and don't be afraid to have those uncomfortable conversations because you're gonna get like, how is so and so? And a lot of times your gut reaction is like, oh, they're okay or they're good. But try to take it a step further and really share what's going on.
I would add that especially if you're at the beginning of this journey, get help before you need it.
Mhm.
Family therapist, couples therapist, like Barbara said, or your own therapist, your own support group. Find those people that you can lean on when times get hard. It's very difficult to do it well when you're in crisis. So
Mhm.
try to be proactive with that. You might think we don't really need a family therapist. That's doing fine for now, and that may be.
Mhm.
But you can develop some really strong muscle memory about around communication on the small issues, like why did you just throw the fork? So that
Mhm.
the big issues, you have some practice. People
Mhm.
get help before you need it.
And although I had been in a support group before, I had never been in a VA caregiver support group. And about a year before we had all of this crises come up, I was invited into one. It's in a book club. And I said, well, I don't feel like I need it right now, but I'd like to do it. I don't know what I would have done without this VA caregiver support group. It's been such a lifeline for me. So yes, get it before you need it. I agree with what Terry was saying.
And finding a project that you can do with your person with Parkinson's outside of caring is really important. So maybe you want to do the garden or, you know, put a photo book together for your family or, my mom and I worked on a documentary together for her life and our work with Parkinson's, and that was really helpful. So, just find something to work on where you can talk about and strategize that's not directly related to their care. It can give you both like a bit of an exhale.
Mhm.
You guys, we are wrapping up now with our program. So just thank you again for everyone here, for Terry, Barbara, Etana, and Amanda for sharing your experience and your wisdom with us today. A big thank you to everyone that joined us today. A lot of comments, a lot of questions came in. If we didn't get to your question or if you have new ones come up, we're here to help. The Parkinson's Foundation Helpline is a trusted live support service available to care partners and anyone impacted by Parkinson's. Staffed by nurses, social workers, and Parkinson's specialists. If you want to talk to Amanda a little bit more, it's a place where you can get answers to both medical and non-medical questions. So be sure to reach out to them. We have the phone number written up on the screen here, 1-800-473-4636, or email them at helpline@parkinson.org. The helpline is free, confidential, and bilingual in English and Spanish. So please do reach out if you have one question. If you have 100, they're here to help. Thank you again to today's webinar sponsor, Amneal, for supporting the mission of the Parkinson's Foundation. And then before we wrap up, we do have one more last favor to ask. Your feedback is essential to make sure that we are covering topics that make the most sense for you and to make sure that we are covering your priorities. So please take a few minutes to just answer that survey once you leave the Zoom screen. Thank you again for being here with us today, and we look forward to connecting with you at our future programs. Take care and be well.